yeah, I know you want an autograph. You should wait in line kind of thing. And I was like, no, I don't want your autograph. I need your help.
One person would show up, right? And that
Yeah.
one person you might get as a client then.
And with me chipping and chipping away, yeah, maybe I didn't get that, but I met somebody or went somewhere and did something or asked a question that took me on a different tangent.
You stayed, you continued, even though like every ounce in your body but one didn't want to. And that's the celebration. I go, that's why people don't fly to the top of mountains, jump out of a helicopter and take photos. Friends, today I have Jennifer Cohen on the podcast. She has a podcast herself called Habits and Hustle. And where I found her is this fantastic book that she just wrote, Bigger, Better, Bolder. She's holding it right there. Jennifer, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jen. I'm actually really impressed with you. I didn't know your story until you just told it to me before we started recording. And that is incredible. I mean, really, bravo. Bravo.
Woo-hoo! It's in the name. It's the Jennifer name.
It is.
What's your middle name?
Mine's Andrea. What's yours?
Jennifer Lynn. Almost all of us are Jennifer Lynn's for some reason. So I thought I'd double check. Yes.
Oh, well, but I mean, no, not this one. Maybe the Canadians don't have the Lynn. We did have the Andrea, but like between the Jennifer and you really are bigger, better, bolder with the fact that you just like climbed all those big boulders, basically. It's amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. So talk to us about the birth of the book and all the things. Like I want to get into those details.
Oh, okay. Well, the birth of the book really came from, actually how it really happened was I did a TED Talk on the idea of being bold and how we basically, our own self-doubt hold us back from even attempting and pursuing what we want to pursue. And, sometimes you just have to, even when you have insecurity, even when you have self-doubt, you should still do it anyway. So that's my message. It's like, don't let that stuff hold you back. You got to do it anyway. And I did this entire talk on how to be bold, and it did very well. It went viral and all the things. And
everybody listening, very well, as in over 7 million views on YouTube of this TEDx talk. So extremely well. Sorry, I just want to make sure
it clarify
that. Yes. There you go.
It went very well. And then basically, because of that, I got a lot of different people reaching out to me in all areas. And I figured, you know what, like, obviously this is striking a chord somewhere, a lot of where. So I decided to take that message and then expand upon it, because the questions I always would get, like, well, how do you become bold? Are you born bold? Do you need to be born bold? What are some ways you can start to be bolder? Like, all of these things kept on coming to me. And I'm talking like hundreds of messages a day, where I figured, this is a really good time, if any, to write down some key principles, some key ways people can live their life more boldly. And really, what I say is, like, chase what they want and not just take what they get. Mm-hmm. Because in life, a lot of times that's what we do. We end up acquiescing to what's in front of us, as opposed to chasing the life that we really want.
Yes, I know. I love your TED Talk on this. And I love how you do the bold example with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Well, a little, like, for everybody listening who hasn't watched the TED show yet, talk a little bit about that whole piece, because I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, people love that story. I didn't realize how much weight I can get out of that story. Wow. But I think it's because he's still a huge star, and like it hasn't waned. But the truth is, what happened, that was actually a pivotal point for me, because when I was really young, I wanted to be a VJ, which is like kind of like a video disc jockey for like MTV, which, you and I grew up on that stuff, but like people probably who are young don't have any idea what that is. It's like such an archaic dinosaur, right? But at the time, it was like kind of like the cool job to have, right? Where you're like on like MTV and talking about music and interviewing all the big rock stars, and like everyone who was young wanted that job. And I knew that if I wanted to get that job, or have even the opportunity to even have an audition for that, because they were having this like, I'm Canadian, and my my version of MTV is something called Much Music, and they were having this world, not worldwide, but countrywide like search for the next VJ. And they did a whole thing on it. And so in order for me to even attempt to get an audition, I knew I had to be super special and stand out and all the things. So I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I get like a big star to be on my audition tape? So when they get it, when I send it in, they'll actually maybe watch it, and then I'll even get that audition. And coincidentally, Keanu Reeves was always wanted to be like he always wanted to do like a Shakespeare play of some kind. So he came to Winnipeg, where I'm from, like a really small town, and he kind of like practiced his chops somewhere like in Winnipeg, where it wouldn't, where he can do it and it wouldn't humiliate him, let's say, if it went badly. So I thought, okay, you know what, I'm going to go ask Keanu Reeves. And by the way, I should tell you, Winnipeg is like minus 45 in the winter. It's super cold. And I told all my friends and my family that I was going to do this. And everyone, of course, laughed at me like, yeah, you're going to get Keanu Reeves. You're 18 years old or 17 at the time, whatever it was, to get on your audition tape. You're going to stand there and wait for him. And I was pretty serious. I'm like, yeah, why not? Like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst is that I don't see him. What's the worst that can happen? That he says no. Like, all of these things, I always live by that motto of what is the worst that can happen. So I went. And I waited outside. I coerced some girl to come with me, and who was my friend at the time. She lasted 3.5 minutes outside. I stayed for like 45 minutes outside. I was frostbitten. I was all like freezing. He finally comes out. I make my way to him through all the crowds and all the paparazzi and everything else. And I tap him on the shoulder. And he's like, yeah, I know you want an autograph. You should wait in line, kind of thing. And I was like, no, I don't want your autograph. What's that going to do? I need your help. And I was so earnest about it, Jen. Like, I was so serious. I think he like saw the earnesty in my eyes. I'm like, I really need your help to get my dream job. And he was so confused, and he was like, wow, like, so like, perplexed. And he's like, give me your phone number and I'll write it down. And so I had no pen or anything. I took a gum wrapper some girl gave me and wrote my number and gave it to him. Went back to school the next day, told everybody what I did. Everyone, of course, laughed at me. And I thought like, yeah, well, at least I tried. And then one day passes, then 2, 3, 4. And then on the 4th day, he leaves a message on my answering machine that I should call him. Well, next thing you know, Keanu's in my mom and dad's like family room, and I'm interviewing him. And the moral of that story is, as far-fetched as it may have sounded, and it does sound, it happened. And the moral of the story is, you never know unless you try, but more than anything, you never know unless you ask. And so that moment was a click moment for me, where I'm like, you know what? You never give up. You never like count yourself out before even making that attempt, because you don't know what can happen. And I decided to live my life at that moment being bold and asking for what I wanted and trying, because to what you and I were talking about this even off camera. You fail, so what? Like, get back up and try again. Like, it's the power of resilience. Like, you have, like, the people who succeed are the people who failed over and over again. So that's not going to be my reason not to attempt, and that's not going to be my reason to not become or actualize to what I want, because I have to. You never know. So you have to go with this idea of, why not me? If it can happen to someone else, it can happen to you. There's no difference. The only real difference, right, is belief. That one person believed in themselves maybe a little bit more, and they made those attempts.
Yeah, or just a little bit longer, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the worst things that's ever happened to me is being a financial advisor in my early stages of life. So I graduate from college, I take this job, I'm all excited. I show up, I'm like, hi, I'm Jen, I'm the new financial advisor. I'm like, okay, Jen, welcome. There's your desk, there's a phone book, there's a phone. I'm like, no, I'm not call center. I'm the financial advisor. They're like, honey, same thing. Like, go over there, start dialing. And I'm like, what? And I had told my parents, like, hey, I'm staying. Like, my parents, like, let me take this job if I promised to take it for a year. And I was so afraid of my parents that I wasn't going to quit. And so all of a sudden, I'm doing this job. I absolutely hate it. I'd never heard the word no so many times in my life. I went home sobbing every day for the first 3 weeks of this job. And then I realized, like, I can't quit. Like, I have to stay. And so if I have to stay, this can be miserable for the rest of the time, or I can figure out how to make it fun. And so then it was, instead of using that energy to go against myself, it was using that energy and how do I make this experience as much as it can be? Who knows what it will be? Well,
Yeah.
then, like, you learn it's a numbers game, right? Like, I would call 97 people, 97 would say no. 3 people would say yes. 2 of the 3 people would lie about their yes and not show up to a meeting, but one person would show up, right? And that
Yeah.
one person you might get as a client then. And then you realize, okay, if that one person is a client, I make $3,000. Now all of a sudden, every no that I'm doing is $20 or $25 or whatever the number is. And so then I would call and be like, okay, that's 25, 50, 75, 100. And I turned it into a positive instead of a negative, which allowed me to continue. And I like had a fabulous first year career that I would have never had otherwise.
100%. I think everything in life truly is a volume. It's a numbers game and volume, right? So the person who makes the most attempts, the person who keeps on throwing as much stuff at the wall, that's going to be the person that's going to something's going to eventually stick and catch fire, right? So like I always say, like something in motion always stays in motion. It's momentum driven, right? Something stagnant stays stagnant, doesn't do anything. So the key to all of this is basically action, like doing something, like making that, making that one more call. It's like making that do that extra rep at the gym. It's like it's always putting yourself in a situation where you're attempting and attempting, because it's that last one that can always be the one, right? And that's just a mindset. Like that's a mindset shift, right? Like, I think that so many times, and there's been a lot of research based on this. It's not just me just babbling on here, but most people, I think it's like in the 70%, 80% range, don't even make one attempt at something. Almost 90 something percent make two. Like almost nobody makes two attempts. So if you're somebody who is trying 3 times, 4 times or more, the likelihood of you being successful versus somebody else is just been like exponentially grown to like, 100x, right? Because of that just simple thing. And if you look around you, and I tell this to people all the time, if you look around you and see the people who've actually succeeded to a place where you wish or aspire to, really, it's not the prettiest or the smartest or the most the greatest person. It's the person, again, who just kept on trying and made those attempts. They were like in that 1 percentile that didn't give up after the first, second, or third. And like I said, it is literally as simple as just like switching that mindset, reframing it in your head to actually design and go and curate the life that you actually want for yourself. And it's not just a career. It goes into everything else. Like the career is like one piece, one sliver of the pie. I'm talking like the life you want, meaningful relationships, experiences, friendships, everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Now I get this, so I'm interested in here on you handle it. Like, well, it's easy for you to be bold or brave because you've had success. What do you talk to people who have been like beaten up for a while and they're like trying to get that mojo back to go back at it and keep going?
I think that's a very myopic way of looking at things, right?
Thank you.
Because
Yes.
the truth of the matter is, like, what people see in front of them is like the tip of the iceberg, right? They don't see all the other things that happen. And like my entire life has been based around failing, right? Like I've failed way more than I've succeeded, and at everything. I'm so used to it. Like if you were to say to me, Jen, and this is what people say to me, they say this all the time to me, what has been your top 3 biggest failures? I can't even name them because there's been so many, right? Like I'm so used to it that it's like water off a duck's ass at this point. Like I don't even, it happens. I'm upset, I mourn it, and then I move on and I try again. It's not something that I I sit in and dwell in, because it's something that I've purposefully made myself very comfortable with that idea. And I created this whole process because people would ask me this all the time. And I call it this 10% target, which is I made myself very comfortable with failing, because I make myself make 10 attempts at anything you want in life. You got to pick one thing and then you make 10 attempts at it. And the reason for it isn't necessarily to get that thing, but it's two-pronged. The first is that a lot of times you don't get that thing, but usually another opportunity will present itself that you never even knew existed by just going down that path of trying, right? That's how I've gotten most of the things that I've succeeded in. It isn't because I went for that exact thing, but I went for something. I had a goal in mind. And with me chipping and chipping away, yeah, maybe I didn't get that, but I met somebody or went somewhere and did something or asked a question that took me on a different tangent or a different direction, where I was like, wow, I like that. I didn't even know that even existed. But if I didn't go try for that for A, I would never even known about B. So that happens. And then the second thing is you putting your mindset and you framing it where I'm committed to making these 10 attempts at whatever it is. When you fail and you know you have to get back up again and try again 9 more times, that's how you get comfortable with the falling, with the failing, with that. That's how you build resilience. Everybody I know who is resilient is because they learned the hard way. They learned it because they fell and they had to figure it out, get back up and try again. They didn't necessarily change the goal, but they changed the attempt or whatever else. But you don't just become resilient because you want to become resilient. It's like you got to build that character. Like that's why a lot of times when you see these people who come from so much privilege and all that, and everything happened easy for them and they got everything so easily, it doesn't build your character. And like they're not the people who've succeeded beyond, beyond their wildest dreams. They're the ones who typically have to acquiesce to what's good enough because they haven't learned the skill set of being bold, of going after things, of learning to accept and be okay with failure to then make another, to go after what they want. So if you're somebody who feels down, or you don't feel like you are any of the things, or you don't think that you have the talent or the skills or the money, or you didn't come from money, or you didn't have the education, hooray for you. You should be applauding, because those are all the reasons why you will succeed, because it teaches you through those strifes to be more resourceful. And being resourceful is the number one skill of how to become successful.
Yeah, I agree. I tie it into mountaineering quite a bit. So when I went to climb Everest, I didn't know that. I thought you just went from base camp to the summit. I didn't know you have to acclimatize. And so acclimatizing means you go up to camp 1 or camp 2 and there's not enough oxygen. So your body starts freaking out. You can't take any more steps forward. So you eat lunch, right? You try to stay in that environment for as long as you can. And then you go back down to base camp. And when you go back down to base camp, your body physiologically changes. And so because of that stress, it produces more red blood cells. Those red blood cells are now in your blood about 3 days later. And you go back up the mountain, you can go higher because the red blood cells carry the less oxygenated environment, allowed you to acclimate to that location. And so now when I talk to my kids about like setting goals and getting ahead, I'm like, oh, you're just acclimatizing. Like your body is just like it's hit its max. So now we got to look at, what did we learn? What do we see? What do we understand? Let's come back home. Let's take that lesson. Let's integrate it into our being. And then let's continue up the climb. But now we're going to be able to go higher because we have more knowledge on what's ahead. And so
I love that.
Yeah.
That's such a microcosm for life. That whole climb situation that you did is such a microcosm for life, right? Because it does teach you, I didn't even realize that you had to go up to camp 1, go back down, get acclimatized, go back to camp 2. But that is what life is, right? Like you keep on changing your baseline.
Yes.
To be able to accept more or to deal with more that you otherwise wouldn't know how to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. And so whether you're physically climbing a mountain or metaphorically, we all are at some point, acclimatization is part of the process, and just understanding that these are the things that allows you more energy to continue forward because you accept it. You understand like, hey, this is part of the process. It's failure is not the opposite of success. It's the stepping toward stones towards it.
Exactly. I love that. That's 100% true.
Yeah. And I also liked how you I agree with you on this. Like the goal isn't always the goal. The goal is sometimes the goal to get you on the right path so that a new door opens and a new goal presents itself and a new thing is there. I remember I interviewed a lady on a podcast who was somebody that helped people write books. I'm like, oh, great. How many did they publish? She's like, none. I'm like, what do you mean? You help people write books and they don't publish them? She's like, no, actually, we do books as part of therapy. They write down their story and then they see it and then they dissect it. And then they say, is there another way that I could write this story and have it all still be true? And they start processing their trauma through their story. And a lot of times the people don't publish them, but they then have this story to reread and say, yeah, this is just as true as the one that I wrote. And now they have these little sound bites in their mind when things come their way on how to navigate forward.
I love that. Who did that? I like that. I'm going to look into that thing. That's a really interesting, actually.
Yeah, no, it's been fascinating. I'll give you the information after the show, but super awesome lady, great therapy method. I was like, hey, I like this. We're going with it.
That's a
Um,
great method that like that to right. So like to your point though, like a lot of times things are because a lot of times when you get to like, I don't know, maybe not for you, but for me, when I've gotten to that, when I've been so focused, right, on getting to a goal and I get to that goal, usually it's not what it's cracked up to be. It's like a very anticlimactic thing anyway. Like you don't really get anything. It's like, okay, here I am. You know what I mean? It's like when you lose weight. Like I want to lose 10 pounds. So you lose, let's say 20 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever it is, right? You get there and you think your whole life's going to be different. You're going to feel great. You're going to look great. You're going to have everyone, every guy will be after you. You'll get every job you want. You get there and like life's still the same, right? Nothing's changed.
yeah.
So right. So like I think that's exception. It's very important to make that note because it is very anticlimactic. So you have to know a lot of times it's not a lot, most all the time, it's in the process of what you get from the process that is way more valuable and way more fulfilling than what that actual thing that you're trying to do is,
Oh,
right? Because
100%. Like I told my son, he's like, well, what does it feel like at the summit? I said, you sit there and you just are so excited because it's all the times that you overcame when you wanted to say no, when you wanted to turn around. You're at the top of that thing celebrating because you didn't. You stayed. You continued, even though like every ounce in your body but one didn't want to. And that's the celebration. I go, that's why people don't fly to the top of mountains, jump out of a helicopter and take photos because the photos have no meaning. It just is a pretty view. They want the journey. We might try to convince ourselves at times that we don't want the journey, but the reality is we crave the climb, whatever that is for ourselves. He's like, okay.
that makes sense. I also think a lot of it when you get to the summit, right? Something like that, right? The only thing I would say to what we just said is the one benefit or the one thing you walk away with is if you say something to yourself, if you make a commitment to yourself, like I am going to do this, and you follow through and then you achieve it, that's how you build, I believe, like true self-confidence, right? Because you're following through with what you said you were going to do, and you see that you can do, your potential is way more than what you actually thought it was. And so that to me is more of like a moment to yourself was like, you know what, I'm stronger than I thought. I'm braver I'm more resilient than I thought. Like it's more proof to you that you can do something. And these things, I believe, do accumulate over time and compound. And you build, that's how someone gets self-esteem and self-confidence. And to me, a lot of times there's a difference. There's a difference between self-confidence actually and self-esteem to me. Like anyone could pretend to be confident outwardly. But self-esteem is something much more, I believe, to be much more internal and more difficult. And self-esteem is from, wow, you know what? Like, I made this commitment to myself. I did it. I am strong. I am this. I am that. That's what really kind of self-esteem brings out authentic self-confidence. And when you go onto that mountaintop and you actually do it, because that's a hard thing to do, and you're not like, it doesn't sound like you were like some type of, maybe you were a college athlete. I don't know. Maybe were you an athlete before?
Yeah, I was an athlete, so that did help. Like it gave me a
Oh,
foundation for sure.
it gave you a foundation. Okay, but even if it didn't or it did, whatever, you still did it. And so the point is that's something that's in your brain that gives you that confidence for the next thing to go after something, right? Because these things, like the compound effect.
100%. And it's the tiniest promises that you make to yourself that matter. Because if you start breaking little promises to yourself, then you just have no foundation to build from. Like
No.
people are like, you have 7 kids. I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
have 7 kids because I did fertility treatment and I didn't have success. And then finally they came up with a chemical cocktail that turned me into a hen. And all of a sudden I had 28 eggs, and those 28 eggs became 14 embryos, and those 14 embryos became 7 children. And
Hold on. In one time?
no, 7, like they froze them and then we'd thaw them and freeze and thaw, freeze and thaw. So I had 1 kid and then I got a bill from the fertility clinic. I'm like, no, you're wrong. Like I already had I have my son. Like, oh, these are your embryos on ice. I'm like, oh, we need to have this conversation again because I was so focused on child number 1. I don't really know if I was paying attention as much as I should have. And they're like, okay, well, here's your options. You use them, you donate them, or you destroy them. And I'm like, okay, well, if I donate them, the rest of my life are going to be like, are you my kid? Are you my kid? Are you my kid? If I destroy them, mind you, it was hard to get my first kid. I thought karma was going to bite me in the butt. So I'm like, that's not an option. So I'm going to use them. And they rank them. So they're like, you know, we think you'll get 3, maybe 4 kids total. I'm like, okay, I grew up Catholic. I can handle that. That'll be fine. Well, you have 3 kids and you still have a whole bunch of embryos on ice. And it'd be nice to be like, just kidding, they're not life, right? Like it'd be nice to be able to change your mind on what you said they were when you're 5 kids in and you still have embryos on ice. And I'm like, if I do that, I'll never trust myself again. And the only thing I have is myself. And so, of course, they plant the last 2 embryos and they're twins. So I go from 5 to 7. And it's crazy. It's beautiful. It's a magic. It's amazing. It is a story I keep on speed dial anytime I want to question something I committed to myself on, because I have to remind myself, like, I do things that I say I'm going to do. And when you have
Exactly.
that confidence, then it's like, hey, it might take me 10 years, but I do things I say I'm going to do. And that, like, you don't put energy into whether you're going to do it or not. You put energy into making it happen no matter how long it takes.
You know what's true? I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves in the world, or or with people, and I talk about this a ton, Jen, is lack of follow through. Like, I think to me that's the biggest turnoff and ugly quality, that if you cannot follow through on your word ever, like look at this podcast, like you have a beautiful background, right? If anyone is actually watching, I don't, but I would figure out a workaround before I just, cancel something outright. If that's, I absolutely had to, right? Because because what would happen, not even so much for you, but for me, I'd feel bad about myself. Like, oh my God, I said I would do something. I never did it. I didn't follow through. And by the way, you know what happens with that? It becomes a slippery slope, right? Because once you start going down that path of not following through, it becomes much easier to have your word mean nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I mean? Like it's like anything. It's like it's a
Well,
gateway drug. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
gateway drug. Yes, yeah. It's like the 4 agreements. Like, have you read the book, The 4
Oh
Agreements?
my God, years ago. I don't remember, but I remember
But one of
liking
the
it.
agreements is and be impeccable with your word. And
Yeah.
it's so important because your word is your foundation of who you are. And
Yeah.
I always think of that book and I'm like, yeah, be impeccable with your word. And even if you just A is A, A is A.
A is A. And I think like I go back and forth. I'm like, because there are people who make excuses and this. There's no excuse. Like if there's always like an unforeseen circumstance. But overall, the lack of follow through, to me, it just tells you so much about someone's character on so many deeper levels, right? It's
Mhm.
not just about the lack of follow through, right? It talks about everything else. And it tells you about that person, like where their confidence lies, because anybody worth their salt, or anyone who has some kind of self-worth, know that that is such an ugly character trait, that, I think it's just a turn off. Like that to me, once that happens, I'm so turned off from the person in any way, business wise, personal wise. Don't you agree?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. Like, yeah, there's too much good in life to like do a second chance there. It's like, okay, I'm done. We're good. Thank
You
you.
can't you can't
Hardly who
trust
you
the
are.
person. They're not trustworthy.
Right. Right. 100%. How do you stay plugged into your why?
I don't, it's so funny. This idea, I hear you, it's such a overused word, why. Like, find your why. I think your why changes with life. I think experience, growth, uh, maturity, like everything, like your life circumstances. My why is always changing, right? Like the reason why I do certain things is because very different than why I do other things, right? But I think the North Star of it all is, I think it's, I love challenge. I love productivity. I love creating, and I like, I like being a good role model for my kids. I have a little girl and a boy, and I want my why now, because I'm in that stage of my life where I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. A lot of my why is for them to see a certain kind of person. I want my little girl to see someone who is strong and productive um, and independent and confident, right? I want my little boy to be disciplined. I want a disciplined and all the other things, right? Like team and all the other things. But you asked me my why like 10 years ago, it may have been different. And if you ask me 10 years from now, it's going to be different. So right now, that's my why. But I believe all of these are very fundamental core beliefs that I always have. And they just kind of tweak, and they get tweaked and changed based on the time in my life.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I will tell you, the kids were the game changer for me. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
someone's
All
watching.
7.
Yeah. Well, they're watching, they're paying attention. I'm modeling an opportunity for them to step into. And I had 5 boys and then twin girls at the bottom.
How old are
Yeah.
they all, by the way?
Yeah. So my oldest is 16 and my youngest are 10. So mine are like 1 year after another, right? Every year. As my son went to school when he was in kindergarten, he goes, Mom, at school they say babies are blessings. I'm like, they are. He goes, Are we going to get a blessing every year? I'm like, I hope not. We're
Oh
probably
my
done
God.
soon. So,
Wow. Do you have like a community paying your grocery bill, or like what do you do? I mean,
right.
I
There's Costco's around this world because of us. I'm quite confident. So
100%. But you look like you look like you're fit and you work out and all that other stuff. I mean, you must have to be so efficient with your schedule.
I am. And like my schedule doesn't look like my dream schedule, right? I just have to accept it as what it is. So when I was training for Everest, I was the mom that had the 12-inch step and a backpack full of water bottles, watching the soccer game, doing my little step ups. Was it hiking a mountain to get the fitness in? No. But it did get it the fitness in and allow me to be a present mom? Yes. And
You
that
brought a step up with you to the soccer game? That is amazing. You mean like a step, like one of those things from step class?
Yes, 100%. Yes. And so, like, everybody else was sitting there watching the game. I'm like over there doing my step ups. And then actually, the crazy thing is I have awesome soccer moms, and some of the soccer moms started doing the same thing. So we had our little step up class on the side of soccer because that's how we could do it. And you just make
I'm
it work.
I want you to come on my podcast. This is great. Like you have some great, I love this whole thing. It's like amazing. Also, it's efficient. Like you're not just sitting there, stationary. You're moving your body, but you're multitasking. That's like such a mom thing to do.
Such
I'm
a
going to
love
start.
thing.
Oh my God, it is so brilliant. So wait, you brought one step and you went
Yes.
boom, 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 boom,
The
boom.
whole time. Yes, 1,000%. Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, when you want something, you figure out a way to make it happen. Like, I'm sorry, no excuses. It will
I
happen.
I agree. No, that's amazing. Not only is it no excuse, this is like absolutely no excuses at all. But how did you get like didn't that step, like going up like that, right? One step down. How did that's a very different than climbing a mountain, right? Like how did you do that?
I mean, it is somewhat of the same muscle patterning, right? So then you'll stand up and then you're weighting that one foot and lifting your leg up and then coming back down. And I mean, it works, right? I mean, it's better than walking straight around the track or around the field because that's not giving me that step up or that step down because you're
Right.
weighting these foot one at a time. So, I mean, it mimics it quite well, to be honest with you.
Did you over time gradually get higher? Did you have a 15-inch step, an 18-inch step,
So yeah, I have those ones where you can do
stacking them up?
12 inch, 18, 24, right? But for me, when you're climbing Everest, you're pretty much staying in that 12-inch range. I would sometimes bring an 18-inch just to spice it up and just do something different pattern wise. But I spent a lot of time, and sometimes I'd go step up and then step down the other side, and then, just do things to step down to the side because when you're on a mountain, it's not perfect, right? You're going to have ground that's always moving. So sometimes you do need to learn how to weight that side or weight the front or weight the back because that's the reality of what you're doing.
I love that. That's great. You know what? Also, forget about climbing Mount Everest. My kid is on like club soccer, club basketball. I got to do a lot of that. I'm just going to go get a step and just do that anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
Great idea.
Right.
Great exercise.
100%. Exactly. And it was awesome because at first I was the weird mom and my son's like, Mom, are you really going to bring this up again? I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm sorry. Like that's the mom you picked. So this is what you're getting. And then the other moms started joining in and it gave us like a reason to like mom power it up and show our kids that, hey, we're here, but we're still doing us. And self-care isn't manicures. Self-care is fitness and healthy eating and balancing life and all these other pieces.
Love it. I love it. Really. That's amazing. I agree. Like my kid always looks at me like, you're the weird mom because of this and that. Like I'm like, and like I just have learned just to like not care. Like I don't care if being judged because I'm doing something that's good for myself. Whoever wants to judge you for that, by the way,
Good luck.
why? Yeah, why is that? Like like think about the source, right? Like I rather do what like in my head what is better for self care than just because I'm too concerned how I look or how it appears. If you live your life by what other people think of you, you're going to be really, really, really sad and disappointed, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of times they're going to look at you like you said, and they'll be like, "Wow, that's a great idea." Like if they're cool, I'm going to do that too. Like once I finish with this, I'm going to go on Amazon and buy a step.
Yes, it's awesome because it fits in your back of your car. So it's always there. So you have no excuse.
No excuse.
Yes.
Exactly. I love it, Jen. I love it. Great
Yeah.
idea.
Okay, so how did you come up with the title of the book?
Well, just because that's how you bigger, better, bolder. It's because that is what it is, right? Like when you become bold and step into yourself and do all the things to do that when you chase what you want, you become a bigger, better version of yourself. But the book also, I should say, because I know we're like going off a lot here, but it's really broken out into a lot of key principles of how people could become bold, right? Because the reality is, a lot of people, and I was saying this earlier, we started this podcast with, I would get this question like, well, what if I wasn't, my personality is like not like that. I'm more naturally quiet. I'm a little bit more an introvert. I mean, you could be all of those things and still be bold. You don't have to be a loudmouth, big personality to become bolder in your life. Boldness to me, in how I see it, is it's a skill like anything else in life, right? Like if you want to get good at tennis or Spanish or climbing a mountain, it really just requires practice. Everything in life requires practice. And, it's first taking a mental, having like a come to Jesus moment and be like, okay, where am I not showing up bold? Where am I bold? Because a lot of times we can be bold in one area of our life, but not bold in another area, right? And so figuring that out first. And then, like baby steps and breaking something down into like smaller achievable chunks. And when you do that, you start making little bold moves. You can do little things, little bold things daily. So when you want to get something that's bigger, you're more comfortable with it. And the reality is if you're not comfortable asking for little things in life, you're never going to be comfortable asking for the bigger things in life. So it's really about practicing and picking these little things to do like little things. Like you can go to a restaurant. I talk about this a lot, right? And even something as silly as asking for the dressing on the side, or, double vegetables, no French fries, like things that come so easily to maybe like people like me and you, or a lot of people, doesn't come so easily for others. They think of it as being, they feel that they're being audacious or rude, or putting people out. And the reality is, it's like, again, it becomes like a reframe of like how, like, of not feeling always that you come second, or you have to just acquiesce to what's good enough. I'll just take what they give me because it's fine. I don't want to make waves. I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to do this. But then you're left with the sloppy seconds of life,
Yeah.
right? Right. Versus just being outspoken. And like the reality is, if you're nice and kind about how you ask for something, more often than not, like people are more than happy to accommodate you, right?
Oh yeah. No, I had this experience where I was getting a massage and the lady goes, "Do you want it harder or softer? What do you like?" I'm like, "You know what? This is fine. Whatever you feel like doing." She's like, "Honey, you're paying for me to give your body a massage. You need to start advocating for what you need so that I can provide you what you desire."
Right.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Okay," because I don't know. I was just like this weird thing. And then all of a sudden I thought about it. I'm like, why am I not being more vocal on this? This is an hour out of my life. This
Mhm.
is right. Like we're spending money at restaurants. We're spending money on the massage table. These people are here to serve us. If somebody was the roles were reversed, we want them to have the best experience ever. And if that means the dressing's on the side or you're holding the pickles on the sandwich, that's what's happening, right? If that means the pressure's harder, and the more you learn to exercise this voice of self-advocacy, the more you give permission to the people around you to do the same.
Well, 100%. And also, like, I think as women, we are like, there's like this like discomfort with, asking for what we want. And like, we're supposed to be more of the submissive or meek, or, kind of like accommodate, it's like all of these like words, these euphemisms that are putting us in a situation where we should be feeling guilty for being more particular, or knowing or advocating for what we want and how we like it. But I guess we've been conditioned for so long to not stand up for ourselves in that way, that when we do, it's like shunned upon by some. Like it's actually shunned upon. Like you can't imagine how many people are like, wow, I can't believe that asked for the dressing on the side. Or like, if we were to say, in that massage, because this happens all the time, right? With me, I'm like, actually, can you go a little stronger? And if there's and if they're not, I'll be like, can you go even stronger? Like it's not, I'll keep on going. And like people are sometimes taken aback. But again, it's like you can't be focusing your attention on what other people's like discomfort is, right? It's like we're constantly shifting the experience to somebody else without putting yourself first. And these are things that I think are so simple that, I mean, if we like, again, if we're not comfortable asking for these little things like a stronger massage, or right, or like the dressing on the side, like then are we expected to ask for bigger things? Like a lot of times, even with dating, we tend to go out with the people who ask us out, versus us being much more vocal and assertive to who we may find attractive, and then ask them out, because there's been this stigma in society that like girls should not be doing that. But yet then, if we're not going to do that, a lot of times what happens, this is basically the routine. We'll go out with the pool of guys that ask us out, and then based on that pool, we'll say, yeah, we like them, don't like them. We'll go into a relationship with them, get married to them. And yet all the people that we had to choose from was a very limited pool of people that were the ones who just asked us out because they weren't shy, or they were bold, or they were, confident, versus opening up the scope so much bigger to be like, okay, I'll go out with this person who asked me out, but I also think that guy at the gym is cute. Maybe I should ask him out, or the guy at work, or the person at the deli, whatever it is, grocery store. Like, again, if we lead our life through what's the worst that can happen, the worst that someone can say is, I'm not interested, no, you can't. All of those words, if we get comfortable with that, the world becomes your oyster of limitless, I should say, limitless possibilities in every stage of life, right? When we take ourselves out, because a lot of times when people say no to you, it could be for a various amount of reasons. It could be, it had nothing to do with you, right? But we internalize everything. Like, you didn't want to ask the masseuse to go harder on your massage because you didn't want her to feel bad, or you didn't want to ask her a question and make her uncomfortable, or you didn't want to, like, feel like you were being bossy or whatever, or all
Right.
these,
Fill in the blank. Yeah. Like fill
yeah,
in the blank of the story
derogatory.
of you guessing what somebody else is going to do instead of you just knowing yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I just want to flip. My purpose is just to, like, flip that a little bit and not think in that kind of very myopic, archaic way of thinking. And like I said, then you become limitless with your opportunities and your possibilities.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's a skill. I was a mom that was a stay-at-home mom. I got into the motions of life and I sold myself on the concept that I'll get back to me when my kids go to college. Like right now, I'm in the season of being a stay-at-home parent. And I mean, I was grateful for the opportunity, but I knew there was more in me. And so I wasn't living from this place of more. Well, a car accident happened. It wakes me up to the fact that I don't get to choose when I die, but I sure get to choose how I live. And I realized like every day is a gift and it might be my last one. So I'm not putting these ideas on hold. I'm going to step into these ideas now. I had conversations with my kids, like it's going to look different. Like mom wants to do some more things that gets mom excited and we're going to figure this out together. And we just have to
Right.
have open communication. And then you look at the things that happened in the last few years because I said yes to myself. Like I want everybody listening to this podcast to buy your book, Bigger, Better, Bolder, because it is going to let you get out of that story of limiting belief and step into who you are. And I know from personal experience, that is where the magic happens. And that's where all of society benefits. It's actually the most selfless thing you can do because we all get to get the ripple effect of you doing you.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it better. I mean, I agree. And like I said, they'll get, like, in the book, there's tons of other key principles of how you become bold. Like, I think curiosity is a big one.
Mhm.
Asking people, like, you find opportunity. Again, that's a gateway drug, right? Because you find so many amazing opportunities by asking questions and being curious and being interested. Because a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. And we learn so much by getting that knowledge by people. Like, I always ask people, and people are like, you ask too many questions. I ask why to everything. Again, I deflect that because of the information I'm going to get. So again, if I can get anything across, another thing I want to get across to people is, like, stop caring so much what other people think about you, and don't focus on that stuff, because it will make you smaller. And it is not, it's like, it's, trust me, at the end of the day, whatever they may think, at the end of the day, they're too focused on themselves to really even care. So maybe in a moment you get judged, big deal, right?
Right.
So why should that 1 minute of judgment stop you from living a life of fulfillment and satiation because you were scared or felt bad or felt weird in that second to ask for something, or do something that you thought was untoward, like walking a 12-inch step at the soccer game.
Yeah. Agreed. Friends, buy the book. This is amazing. Jenn is filled with a ton of wisdom. She is sharing it in this book so that we can all step into our superpowers and lock out the noise of life. So, Jenn, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
And thank you for having me. And I appreciate you making a workaround.